So a familiar theme for all of us, Chris Froome back in yellow after a dramatic stage 3 from 2015, and Andrew Talansky returns with us one more time. You think about this stage early in 2015, what's your number one thought?
Crazy. The crash, the finish, everything about it. A little bit heartbreaking because we wanted Dan Martin to win the stage, obviously, and we had put a lot on that, and I know Dan believed he could, and I think he was obviously close, but we just missed it by that little bit, and I know it meant a lot to him. So, you know, we kept guys up there. Dan was up near the front, Ryder and myself, and so we kind of kept everything. We're content, but not happy, I would say.
Yeah, Dan's had some very good moments since you were teammates with him. When you're watching the tour, do you feel a special connection with him?
Yeah, I always love watching Dan race. I mean, I enjoyed racing with him. Dan was an incredible teammate, somebody I always enjoyed racing with and working with and being around. And what I really loved about Dan is when he knew certain days, certain things when he could win and that he was good at, and he was not afraid to say that, you know, like, I'm going to win today. And sure, maybe he didn't win every time, but you have to go in with that mentality. And that's what I liked about Dan. Is he can be quiet and soft-spoken, but he had that confidence inside him when he needed it, and it was exciting, you know, especially on a day like Mur de Huy. I remember watching him. Yeah, I think he did win that stage. I think we maybe did it in 2015. It's kind of that. I should remember what it's called. I don't. It's like kind of a draggy couple K climb, and it levels off toward the finish. And I think Alaphilippe maybe did well, but I think Dan won it in 18, maybe. Yeah, 2018 is the one that I'm thinking about. But that day, like, I was watching him on TV, and I knew we had done that climb before, and he had lost, and he was so angry because he's like, I know what I did wrong. I should have won. And then he went out and won that exact, you know, same finish. And I remember just screaming at the TV because I was so excited for him. And, you know, he's one of the few people that I'll get really excited watching race, just because we had a relationship racing for such a long time.
He's a guy that's easy to pull for with the way how he pours his body and all of his emotion into it. Yeah, I think a lot of people are fans of the way Dan races. So stage 17 of this tour, a couple weeks after the one we just watched, a couple weeks after the stage we just watched, you came in second place, and you were out front, and it looked like you had a real chance to come in first place. When you think about that day, stage 17, 2003, is it, I'm sorry, of 2015, is it a top moment of your tour career, or is it a missed opportunity?
I mean, it's both. You know, it's hand in hand. Obviously, I have fond memories of it, but I think that was probably my only regret from my cycling career is not winning. You know, I wouldn't even just say Grand Tour stage, specifically a stage at the Tour de France, because I came close in 2013 and then again in 2015. And that, I mean, I had the legs that day. I mean, in hindsight, you can say, yeah, when, you know, Geschke went easy, you go with him, you know, but you don't know if that works, because then maybe people follow you and this, that, and the other. And you're kind of banking on guys like, who was I with? Like Thibaut Pinot being a little bit stronger on the climb to help pull him back before that, you know, on the second to last climb. And there's all these ifs, ands, or buts, and it's all in hindsight. In the moment, you just make the decisions that you think are the best. Obviously, that little bit of hesitation, you know, potentially, maybe I would have lost anyway if I'd been with them, but potentially cost me a stage of the tour. So it's both. It's a good memory because it was super fun racing that day. You know, being in the front of the tour is always fun. You feel like you're really in the race. But coming in second really hurts. So
right.
It's both.
A couple of years later, you retired at the relatively young age of 28. Why?
It's a good question. I think I'd grown a little bit disillusioned with the sport as a whole. With time to reflect on that, I don't know if that's just because of the team I was on, because of what that team had become. And it's certainly, you know, the Slipstream Sports that I signed for in 2013, and even the one that I was riding with in 2015 was not the same, despite obviously Rigo in 2017 had a great Tour de France. It wasn't the same feeling. And I got into the sport because I loved riding my bike. And frankly, I understand it's a job, but if you're not enjoying it a lot of the time, not that you have to enjoy every moment of racing or riding in the freezing rain or whatever, but you have to be enjoying it enough, because as you see from the crash, we talked about the injuries people sustain, the occasional death in the sport, the cost benefit ratio, you have to weigh that all the time. And for me, I wasn't seeing, you know, the benefit, frankly. And I didn't also see a plan, you know, I didn't see where the team was going, where things were headed. I had come out of 2016 off what I, on a personal level, consider the best season of my career, given what the second half was, and the best result of my career, which was a top 5 in the Vuelta. And I was really motivated. I mean, I had never loved riding my bike as well as the sport of racing more than at the end of 2016. And I vividly remember I showed up at the first just 1 week little training camp. And I guess I had this expectation, because we said, okay, we're going to forego the Tour in 2016 and go to the Vuelta. And given who was in front of me at that Vuelta, I was like, you know, I can get onto the podium of Grand Tours here, you know, depending on who's there. And if I work on this, that, and the other, and we get a little better and we improve the TT equipment and a few other things. And I came in really motivated off that 2016 season. And it was like, I was met with this wall of just, there was no plan. There was no idea. There was no, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to approach the Tour de France this year. Here's what we're going to do equipment wise. Here's what we're going to do training camp wise. There was no plan. And it was a very odd feeling. You know, it kind of took the wind out of my sails almost from the beginning of the season, because I was like, we built this project in 2016, and now I show up in 2017 and there's nothing. You know, you're asking me to ride a time trial bike that's slower. You're asking me to do X, Y, Z. And instead of like, all right, let's build and carry that momentum forward, it was a really odd sensation. And I think I just kind of, from that initial interaction in 2000, that was the very end of 2016, but into 2017, I just didn't have that same motivation. I kind of became a little disillusioned, because I was like, why am I getting, I just had a newborn, my son, Bodhi, and I was willing to make the sacrifices, but I was like, if nobody else is going to, give 100, like, what's the point?
I appreciate how forthright you were about it. And I'm listening and thinking at the same time. And it sounds like legitimate frustration. I think I would have been frustrated in the same way, but frustration goes away. Once it went away, did you consider it all coming back and trying to find a team that aligned with the way you thought about the sport?
I think one of the issues, and I guess this is part 2 of it, is I had seen in 2016 how fickle the sport was. Like I was somebody who got, decent results throughout my career, right? And I think that I had shown, sure, there was some inconsistency, but the second part of 2016 was amazing. And I watched in the first half of 2016, I couldn't get, my agent couldn't get an email returned from a single team, right? And then I turned it around and it was, oh yeah, Andrew's great, this and that. And I'd already signed with Slipstream with JV for 2017. But it was just such a reminder of like, how is this possible? Like, if you believe in somebody's talent and their ability, then you back them and you help them get the most out of themselves, and you create that, you help them find that, right? It's not something that just disappears. And I'd seen that in 2016, like, wow, that's really interesting that people are just willing to completely write you off. And that was a little part of the disillusionment, was that. Just seeing, everybody knows that cycling, there really truly are no friends. It's a business and it's a professional sport. But it's, some people would argue, I'm sure people are friends in the sport. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are looking out for themselves rather than for the riders or for, what's best in the interest of the entire team. People rarely know the entire behind the scenes story, I would say, which, if anybody watching this has read Phil Gaiman's books, you can get an insight into, certainly what his time was like dealing with Jonathan Butters and that team. And that's not to be derogatory. It's just everybody has a different experience on each team. And I think that got to me as well. You know, I saw some of my friends in the sport, Brent Bookwalter is one of them, Rohan Dennis is one of them, get treated so poorly. It was a combination of factors. Phil Gaiman's actually, you know, a good friend of mine. And I just watched these people be treated poorly or discarded, or, you know, in the case of Ron, written off as problematic instead of anybody taking the time to care. And then, you know, in the case of Rohan, you see when somebody does take the time to care, you see what the results are. So I think it was a combination of all those factors. My personal disillusionment with it was building kind of throughout that whole year.
So you hang it up in 2017 in your late 20s at age 28. You stayed active though. Triathlons attracted you next. How did that go?
I mean, it was a good way to spend a couple of years. I think, frankly, kind of as I said, with hindsight, you can look back at things in cycling and look at it in a more rational way. I actually had written a piece on this blog I have about that recently, because it's pretty cool. The triathlon Ironman community, I met some amazing people, some lifelong friends. They're super welcoming. You know, the reality is I was probably never going to be the very best at that sport. I think when I left cycling, because it's the only thing I had done since I was 17, you know, once I picked up a bike, I loved it. I was kind of afraid of stepping out of that identity of, well, you're not a pro athlete anymore, right? I mean, when you're a pro cyclist, you're a pro cyclist. Like it like ticks so many boxes, right? It kind of explains your life, you know, like your daily life, your yearly life, like everything's planned out, you know what it's going to look like. People understand when you're like, no, I can't come to this because I have to ride for 6 hours tomorrow. And I kind of didn't know, I wasn't ready at that time to step away, I think, completely from sport. So I was like, oh, Ironman, that's good. You know, like I can swim and ride. So obviously I couldn't run very well, but, I tried. And frankly, it was a great experience because, like I said, I've met some people who will be lifelong friends, and it kind of got me back into swimming and running, which are just as you age, like, you know, between 30 and 50 or something, that it's good to do things other than just ride your bike. But yeah, so I'm obviously done with that now as well. But I think that was it. At the time, I was just looking for another way to channel that competitive drive or kind of feel like you're still living like a pro athlete.
And how serious is the surfing for you now?
That's the one. Yeah, I truly love to surf. I tell people, like, if I had grown up somewhere with waves, I don't think I ever would have gotten on a bicycle. It's a super addicting sport, and it kind of embodies everything I love about sport. Is that obviously if you're, you know, it can be a little annoying if you're in a massive crowd sometimes, but a lot of the time, if you manage to find some good waves and you're out there and it's pretty peaceful, it's kind of like riding a bike. You know, you're left alone out there with your thoughts, and you're just kind of out in nature. And that's what I love most about those long solo bike rides. And, you know, I think on the surfing side, I mean, it's super fun. I think naturally I'm drawn to, like, for my own comfort zone, but to see, you know, how big of a wave I can surf, because you need that little bit of adrenaline in your life. So you have to find out what's, you know, some guys go drive race cars afterwards, like Tom Boonen or something. And you need to find out what it's going to be for you. And I certainly, you know, surfing has definitely helped with that transition away from professional sport.
It's an Olympic sport now, you know that?
I do, yeah. That should be, yeah, it's certainly not for me, but it should be interesting. I mean, just kind of following more of the guys in the sport and getting to know a few of them over on Maui. I think it'll be, I'll be able to watch it with a little more, certainly a lot of interest, assuming the Olympics go ahead.
Well, Andrew, we've covered a lot of ground, from stage 3 in 2015 to your reasons for retiring. I really appreciate your insight to all of it. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.